In a park, a millionaire challenges a girl with an absurd bet. "I'll give you $1 million if you cure me." She just touches his hand and whispers something, while he laughs and mocks her incredulously. What he thought was a joke led him straight to the biggest win of his life. Watch until the end. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. William Morgan stared through the tinted windows of his luxury SUV, watching children play in Central Park with a bitterness that had become as familiar to him as the leather of his wheelchair. Once the most powerful real estate developer in Manhattan, 5 years confined to this chair after a severe stroke had twisted his soul into something even he didn't recognize anymore. "Park here, Dennis," he commanded his driver, pointing toward a bench where children were playing. His therapist had suggested exposure to normalcy might help his depression. William thought it was ridiculous, but he had nothing better to do with his Thursday afternoon. Dennis helped him into his wheelchair and positioned him near the playground. William adjusted his expensive cashmere scarf against the crisp October air and observed the scene with thinly veiled contempt. Children laughing, running, taking their healthy bodies for granted. A small group caught his attention. 4 kids playing doctor, using sticks for stethoscopes and leaves for medicine. A petite girl with serious eyes seemed to be leading the game. Something about her intensity made William pause. She couldn't be more than 10, with copper-brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing a faded blue jacket that was clearly a hand-me-down. "Doctor, Emma, we need help. The patient is very sick," one of the boys called out dramatically. The girl, Emma, approached their pretend patient with surprising authority. "I need everyone to step back. This is a complicated case." William snorted loudly enough for them to hear. The children turned, noticing him for the first time. "Is something funny, mister?" Emma asked, her gaze unnervingly direct. William was taken aback. Children usually avoided his gaze, intimidated by his chair or his perpetual scowl. "Just amused by your game," he replied, unable to keep the sarcasm from his voice. "Playing doctor won't make anyone better in the real world." Instead of being deterred, Emma stepped closer. "How do you know?" "Have you tried it?" Her boldness irritated him. "Listen, kid, I've spent millions on the best doctors in the country. None of them could help me walk again. So excuse me if I don't believe in your make-believe medicine." The other children backed away, but Emma stood her ground. William felt a perverse desire to crush this child's naive optimism. "Tell you what," he said, reaching for his wallet, "I'll make you a deal. If you can cure me, I'll give you $1 million. He pulled out a business card and held it out. "Here's my card. Have your parents call me when you've figured out how to make miracles happen." To his surprise, Emma took the card and studied it carefully. "William Morgan, Morgan Tower," she read aloud. Then she looked up at him with those serious eyes. "I don't need $1 million, but I'll help you anyway." Before he could respond, she stepped forward and placed her small hand over his. Her touch was warm against his perpetually cold fingers. She leaned in close and whispered something, a string of words he couldn't make out, a language he didn't recognize, or perhaps just nonsense. "What did you say?" he demanded. Emma stepped back, her expression serene. "So you'll know when it works?" William laughed harshly. "Right. Well, thanks for the magical treatment, Dr. Emma. I feel better already." His voice dripped with mockery. She didn't react to his sarcasm, just nodded as if they'd completed a business transaction. "You should go home now, Mr. Morgan. Rest is important for healing." "I've had enough of this," William muttered, signaling Dennis, who was waiting nearby. As his driver wheeled him back to the car, William glanced back at Emma, who was watching him with an expression that unsettled him. Not pity, but something like anticipation. Back in his penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline, William attempted to forget the bizarre encounter. He instructed his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, to prepare dinner while he checked his stock portfolio on his tablet. The markets had been good to Morgan Enterprises lately, though he was no longer actively involved in day-to-day operations. After his stroke, the board had gently but firmly pushed him into a chairman emeritus role, a glorified mascot for the empire he'd built. 3 hours after returning from the park, William was half watching a business news channel when he felt it, a tingling in his right foot. He'd experienced phantom sensations before, cruel tricks of the nervous system that his doctors had warned about. He ignored it, but the tingling persisted, spreading slowly up his calf. William muted the television, staring down at his legs as if they belonged to someone else. He tried to wiggle his toes, something he hadn't been able to do since the stroke. His big toe moved, just slightly, but unmistakably. "Mrs. Chen!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Mrs. Chen, come here!" His housekeeper rushed in, alarmed by his tone. "Mr. Morgan, what's wrong?" William pointed at his foot with a shaking hand. "Look," he whispered. With immense concentration, he managed to move his toe again. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "Should I call Dr. Friedman?" William nodded, unable to speak. As she hurried to make the call, he remembered Emma's words. "You'll know when it works." Impossible, it had to be coincidence. There was no way a child's game could have anything to do with this. Yet as the tingling spread further up his legs, William found himself thinking of those serious eyes and the warm touch of her hand on his. Dr. Friedman arrived within the hour, her face carefully composed in what William recognized as her managing patient expectations expression. She ran through a series of tests, checking reflexes that hadn't responded in years. "This is unusual," she admitted, her professional demeanor slipping momentarily. "There are documented cases of spontaneous recovery after stroke, but after 5 years..." She trailed off, then regained her composure. "We'll need to run comprehensive tests. I'll schedule an MRI first thing tomorrow." After she left, William sat alone in his living room, staring at the glittering city below. For the first time in years, he felt something dangerous growing in his chest. Hope. That night, he dreamed of Emma. In the dream, she stood before him in a doctor's white coat that dragged on the ground, holding a stethoscope too large for her small hands. "The treatment has begun," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "But healing isn't just about walking, Mr. Morgan." He woke at dawn, covered in sweat. The tingling in his legs had intensified to an almost painful level. With a sudden, reckless impulse, William threw back his covers and swung his legs over the side of the bed. Using his arms for leverage, as he'd learned in countless physical therapy sessions, he pushed himself to a standing position, expecting to collapse immediately, as he always had before. But his legs held. Trembling violently, gripping the nightstand for support, William Morgan stood on his own 2 feet for the first time in 5 years. And in that moment, he knew he had to find Emma again. The news of William Morgan's sudden improvement spread through New York's medical community like wildfire. Dr. Friedman assembled a team of specialists who subjected William to a battery of tests over the next week. MRIs, CT scans, nerve conduction studies, each produced the same baffling results. "I've never seen anything like this, Doctor," Friedman admitted during a consultation in William's penthouse. She spread several brain scans across his marble coffee table. "The neural pathways that were damaged by your stroke show signs of regeneration. It's as if your brain has rewired itself." "So I'll walk normally again?" William asked, leaning forward in his wheelchair. Though he could stand and even take a few shaky steps with a walker, he wasn't steady enough for regular mobility yet. "Potentially, yes. With intensive physical therapy, there's reason to believe you could regain significant function." She hesitated. "But Mr. Morgan, I need to be clear. This type of spontaneous recovery is extraordinarily rare. We have no medical explanation for what's happening." William thought of Emma but said nothing. The rational part of his brain insisted it was mere coincidence, yet he couldn't shake the memory of her touch, the whispered words he couldn't understand. "Schedule whatever therapy you think best," he told Dr. Friedman. "Money is no object." After she left, William wheeled himself to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse and gazed out at Central Park in the distance. Emma was out there somewhere. The business card he'd given her had his private number, but no call had come. William had never been a patient man. Before his stroke, he'd been known for his aggressive business tactics and demanding nature. 5 years of forced immobility had not improved his temperament. If the girl wouldn't come to him, he would find her. The next morning, Dennis drove him to Central Park. William insisted on using his walker, moving painfully slowly along the pathways near where he'd encountered Emma. Several hours of searching yielded nothing. He returned the following day and the day after that. No sign of the serious-eyed girl. By the end of the week, William's frustration had reached a breaking point. His physical therapist reported remarkable progress. His muscle tone was improving faster than expected, But finding Emma had become an obsession that overshadowed everything else. "We need to expand our search," he told Dennis as they drove back to Morgan Tower after another fruitless afternoon. The girl might not come to the park regularly. "If I may suggest, sir," Dennis said carefully, "perhaps we should hire a professional. A private investigator could—" "No," William cut him off sharply. "No investigators. This stays private." The last thing he needed was tabloid headlines about a billionaire searching for a child. Besides, something told him that conventional methods wouldn't work with Emma. October gave way to November. William's strength continued to improve, though he still relied on his walker. Each day he visited different parks across Manhattan, hoping to spot Emma's copper-brown ponytail and serious eyes. On a particularly cold Tuesday, William found himself in a run-down playground on the edge of Harlem. The swings were rusty, the slide covered in graffiti. Only a few children braved the bitter wind. None of them was Emma. As William was preparing to leave, he noticed a man collecting empty cans from a trash bin. Something about the methodical way he worked caught William's attention. The man wore layers of mismatched clothes, his grey beard neatly trimmed, despite his obviously homeless status. "Excuse me," William called out, awkwardly maneuvering his walker toward the man. The can collector looked up, wariness immediately filling his weathered face. "I got permission to take these," he said defensively. "I'm not here about the cans," William assured him. "I'm looking for someone. A girl, about 10 years old. Name's Emma. Serious expression, copper-brown hair, plays doctor with the other kids." The man studied William carefully, taking in his expensive coat and the custom walker. "Why's a man like you looking for a kid like that?" William had prepared for this question. "She left something valuable at my office during a school tour. I'm trying to return it to her." The can collector didn't look convinced. "Lot of kids named Emma in this city." "This one's special," William said, surprising himself with the emotion in his voice. "She has these eyes, like she can see right through you." Something flickered in the man's expression. "Might know who you're talking about. There's a girl fits that description. Don't know her name, but she's got that look. Old soul in a young body, you know." William's heart raced. "Where can I find her?" "She don't come to parks much anymore. Weather's too cold." The man hesitated. "Sometimes I see her at St. Mark's Community Center on 118th. They do free lunches on Thursdays." William pulled out his wallet and extracted several $100 bills. "Thank you," he said, holding out the money. The man looked at the cash, then back at William's face. "Keep your money, mister. But if you're meaning that girl any harm, you should know people look out for her. Special kids got special protection, understand?" "I mean her no harm," William said. "Quite the opposite." The man nodded slowly, then returned to his can collection without taking the money. William tucked the bills into the man's coat pocket anyway, then made his way back to where Dennis waited with the car. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. William spent Wednesday researching St. Mark's Community Center, a former church converted to serve the neighborhood's underprivileged. His company had actually donated to its renovation years ago, a tax write-off he'd promptly forgotten about. Thursday morning, William surprised his physical therapist by pushing himself harder than ever before. "I need to be able to walk with just a cane today," he insisted. "No walker." "Mr. Morgan, that's rushing things," the therapist cautioned. "You've made remarkable progress, but—" "I don't pay you to tell me what I can't do," William snapped, the old arrogance flaring. "Now help me with the cane or get out." 2 painful hours later, William could manage short distances with just a cane. It wasn't pretty. His gait was uneven, his movements jerky, but he could do it. Dennis drove him to 118th Street that afternoon. The community center was a modest brick building with a colorful mural painted across its facade, children's hands in rainbow colors reaching toward a sun. A small sign announced, "Community Lunch, Thursdays 12 to 2 p.m., all welcome." William took a deep breath and gripped his cane tightly. "Wait here," he told Dennis. "I need to do this alone." The interior of the center was warm and smelled of vegetable soup. Several long tables had been set up in what must have once been the church's main hall. People of all ages sat eating, the buzz of conversation filling the space. Most wore clothes that spoke of hard times, worn jackets, scuffed shoes, tired expressions. William felt conspicuous in his tailored overcoat and Italian leather shoes. Several people glanced his way, conversations pausing momentarily before resuming. He scanned the room anxiously, looking for Emma's copper-brown hair. A woman in an apron approached him. "Welcome to St. Mark's," she said warmly. "Are you here for lunch? We have plenty." "Thank you, no," William replied. "I'm looking for someone. A girl named Emma, about 10 years old. Brown hair, very serious expression." The woman's smile faded slightly. "Are you family?" "No, I'm—" William hesitated. "She helped me recently. I wanted to thank her." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the back of the room. "Emma Thompson. She's helping her grandmother in the kitchen." William's heart pounded as he made his way through the tables. At the far end of the hall, a doorway led to what appeared to be a large industrial kitchen. And there, standing on a stool to reach a counter, was Emma. She was stirring a massive pot, her copper-brown hair tucked under a hairnet, her face fixed in concentration. Beside her, an older woman with the same serious eyes was cutting bread. William stopped in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. What was he doing here? What would he say to this child who had somehow changed his life? Before he could retreat, Emma looked up. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and William saw recognition dawn on her face. She didn't seem surprised to see him. Instead, she nodded slightly, as if confirming something she'd already known. "Hello, Mr. Morgan," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the kitchen. "You can walk now." It wasn't a question. The kitchen fell silent. The older woman, Emma's grandmother, William presumed, looked between them with confusion. "Emma? Do you know this man?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of protective concern. Emma nodded, setting down her stirring spoon. "He's the man from the park, Grandma, the one I told you about." William stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm William Morgan. I met your granddaughter a few weeks ago." The woman wiped her hands on her apron, her expression guarded. "Margaret Thompson. People call me Maggie." She studied him carefully. "Emma mentioned meeting a man in a wheelchair. You don't seem to need one now." "That's complicated," William replied. "Could we speak privately? I have something for Emma." Maggie hesitated, then nodded toward a small office off the kitchen. "We can talk in there. Emma, keep stirring the soup, honey. Don't let it stick to the bottom." The office was barely large enough for the three of them. A desk covered with paperwork occupied most of the space, leaving just enough room for two folding chairs. William lowered himself carefully into one, while Maggie took the other. Emma remained standing by the door. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Thompson," William said, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing an envelope. "I made a promise to your granddaughter, and I'm here to fulfill it." He handed the envelope to Maggie. "This is a check for $1 million made out to Emma Thompson." Maggie's hands trembled as she opened the envelope and stared at the check. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke," William assured her. "I told Emma if she could cure me, I'd pay her $1 million. I was in a wheelchair, had been for 5 years after a stroke. The doctors said I'd never walk again." He gestured to his cane. "It's not perfect yet, but I'm making progress every day. It started after I met Emma." Maggie looked from the check to her granddaughter. "Emma, what did you do?" Emma shrugged, her expression unchanged. "I just helped him like I help everyone, Grandma." William leaned forward. She touched my hand and whispered something. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but that night, I started to feel sensation in my legs. The doctors can't explain it. Maggie's face paled. She carefully folded the check and placed it back in the envelope. "Mr. Morgan, my granddaughter doesn't have magical healing powers. Whatever happened to you was a medical phenomenon. We can't accept this money." "But I promised—" "We don't want your money," Emma interrupted, her voice steady. "Not for me, anyway." William blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Emma stepped further into the office, her serious eyes fixed on his. "If you want to help everyone at the shelter, not just me." "Shelter?" William asked, looking between them. Maggie sighed, shooting Emma a warning look before turning back to William. "We live at Riverside Haven. It's a temporary housing facility in what used to be Lincoln Academy on 122nd Street. An abandoned school?" William asked, unable to keep the shock from his voice. "It's not abandoned anymore," Emma corrected. 42 families live there now, plus 18 single people." Her precise knowledge of the numbers surprised William. "It's not ideal," Maggie admitted, "but it's better than the streets. The city was going to tear it down, but a non-profit organization, Got permission to convert it into emergency housing. The funding is always shaky, though. We never know how long we can stay. William was silent for a moment, processing this information. The check in the envelope suddenly seemed inadequate, almost insulting. "I'd like to see this place," he said finally. "If you're comfortable with that." Maggie studied him, her expression unreadable. "Why? So you can feel good about helping the less fortunate?" Her directness caught William off guard. Before his stroke, no one had spoken to him that way in years. "No," he said slowly, "because Emma asked me to help everyone, not just her. I can't do that without understanding what help means." Something in his tone must have convinced her. Maggie nodded. "We're finished here at 4. You can come with us then." William checked his watch. "I'll be back at 4. He spent the next 2 hours sitting in his car with Dennis, making calls to cancel his afternoon appointments. At precisely 4 o'clock, he returned to the community center. Emma and Maggie were waiting outside, both wrapped in worn winter coats. "We usually take the bus," Maggie said, eyeing the luxury SUV dubiously. "Please let me drive you," William offered. "It's the least I can do." The ride to Riverside Haven took less than 15 minutes, but it transported William to a world he rarely acknowledged, despite having lived in New York his entire life. As they drove deeper into Harlem, the gleaming skyscrapers of Midtown gave way to tenements and vacant lots. Dennis navigated the car down streets that grew increasingly narrow and neglected. Lincoln Academy loomed at the end of a block of mixed residential and commercial buildings. The former school was a hulking brick structure, its windows intact, but its facade marred by years of neglect. A faded sign hung above the entrance: Riverside Haven Emergency Housing. "Home sweet home," Maggie said without irony, as Dennis pulled up to the curb. Inside, the building's past as a school was immediately evident. The hallways were lined with lockers, though many had been removed to make space for storage bins. Classroom doors had been fitted with simple locks, converting them into private rooms for families. The air was filled with the sounds of life: children laughing, a radio playing somewhere, the clatter of cookware. "We have community bathrooms on each floor," Maggie explained as she led William through the building. "The gym serves as a common area, and the cafeteria is still used for meals. Most families cook on hot plates in their rooms, but we try to do community dinners twice a week." William was struck by how organized everything was despite the obvious limitations. Handmade signs directed residents to different services. A bulletin board displayed job listings, apartment opportunities, and notices for free health clinics. "This is our room," Maggie said, stopping at what had once been a chemistry classroom. She unlocked the door and gestured for William to enter. The space had been divided by hanging curtains to create a semblance of separate rooms. A small kitchenette occupied one corner, with a folding table and 2 chairs nearby. What had once been lab tables now served as multi-purpose storage and work surfaces. "It's not much," Maggie said, "but it's clean and safe. That's more than many people have." William noticed Emma heading to one of the curtained-off areas, presumably her bedroom. "How long have you been here?" he asked Maggie. "Almost 2 years now," she replied, filling an electric kettle. "Would you like some tea? It's just the cheap stuff, but it's hot." "Yes, thank you," William said, lowering himself carefully onto one of the folding chairs. "If you don't mind me asking, what brought you here?" Maggie's hands stilled momentarily. "Life, Mr. Morgan. Just life." She plugged in the kettle and turned to face him. "I was a teacher for 30 years. Elementary school in the Bronx. When my daughter, Emma's mother, got sick, I took early retirement to care for her and Emma." She paused, and William saw a flicker of deep pain cross her face. "The medical bills took everything. My pension wasn't enough. When my daughter passed, the landlord raised our rent. We couldn't stay. We bounced around for a while, stayed with friends, but eventually ended up here." William felt a knot forming in his stomach. Before his stroke, he had been involved in countless real estate deals that had displaced people just like Maggie and Emma. He had never given much thought to where those people went. "I'm sorry about your daughter," he said quietly. "Thank you," Maggie replied. "Emma was 7 when it happened. She's been different since then, more serious. Sometimes I think she's trying to fix everyone because she couldn't fix her mother." From behind the curtain, Emma's voice called out, "I can hear you, Grandma." Maggie smiled slightly. "Good. Then you can hear me telling Mr. Morgan that you're the smartest girl in your class despite everything we've been through." Emma emerged from behind the curtain, holding a newspaper clipping. She approached William and handed it to him without a word. William took the yellowed paper and felt his blood run cold. It was a photo of him from about 3 years ago, standing with a group of investors outside Lincoln Academy. The headline read, "Morgan Enterprises acquires historic school for luxury development." "That's you, isn't it?" Emma asked, though she clearly already knew the answer. William stared at the photo, memories flooding back. Lincoln Academy had been part of a large portfolio of properties his company had acquired from the city. The plan had been to demolish the school and build upscale condominiums. The stroke had happened shortly after the deal closed, and William had never followed up on the project's progress. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "That's me." "Your company bought this building," Emma continued. "They were going to tear it down. That's what Mr. James told us. But then some non-profit talked to them after you got sick, and they let us stay instead. Temporarily." William looked up at Maggie, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "I didn't know," he said, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. "After my stroke, I wasn't involved in day-to-day operations." "Would it have mattered if you were?" Maggie asked quietly. The question hit William like a physical blow. Before meeting Emma, the honest answer would have been no. The displacement of a few dozen families would have been an acceptable cost of doing business, a footnote in a profitable venture. "I don't know," he answered truthfully. Emma took the clipping back from him. "Now you know," she said simply, "and you need to see what you caused." William felt something shift inside him, as if the ground beneath his carefully constructed world had suddenly tilted. He looked around the makeshift home, at the woman who had lost everything but her dignity, at the serious-eyed child who had somehow given him back his ability to walk. "Yes," he said softly, "I do need to see." Over the next few weeks, William became a regular visitor at Riverside Haven. At first, the residents regarded him with suspicion, his expensive clothes and chauffeur-driven car marking him as an outsider. But as November turned to December and William continued to appear, bringing supplies and spending hours listening to people's stories, the wariness gradually faded. He started small, asking Maggie what the shelter needed most urgently. Her list was practical: toiletries, winter clothing, school supplies for the children. William sent Dennis to purchase everything on the list, then personally helped distribute the items. "You don't have to do the actual handing out, you know," Maggie told him, as they arranged toiletry kits on a table in the gymnasium. "Most donors just drop things off." "I'm not most donors," William replied. He was using a cane less frequently now, though his gait remained somewhat unsteady. His physical therapist had declared his progress nothing short of miraculous. What William didn't tell Maggie was that he found a strange peace in these visits. For the first time in his life, he was doing something that had no profit motive, no angle to be worked, no deal to be closed. It was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Emma often watched him during these visits, her serious gaze following him as he spoke with residents or helped serve meals. She rarely initiated conversation, but when William approached her, she would engage willingly enough. "Why did you pick me?" he asked her one afternoon as they sorted donated books for the shelter's makeshift library. In the park that day, "Why did you agree to try to heal me?" Emma considered the question carefully, arranging a stack of children's novels by reading level. "You needed it," she said finally. "Not the walking part, the other part." "What other part?" She looked up at him, her eyes wise beyond her years. "The part that was more broken than your legs." Before William could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. A woman's voice called out in panic, "Someone help! Miss Thompson collapsed." William and Emma rushed from the classroom-turned-library to find Maggie slumped against a wall, her face ashen. Several residents were gathered around her, one supporting her head, another offering water. "Grandma!" Emma pushed through the crowd, her usual composure cracking. William followed, his heart racing. "What happened?" "She was helping move some furniture," explained a middle-aged man, whom William recognized as one of the shelter's volunteers. "Then she just went pale and collapsed, said she felt dizzy." "Call an ambulance," William instructed, kneeling awkwardly beside Maggie. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. "No ambulance," Maggie protested weakly. "Too expensive. I'll be fine in a minute." "This isn't negotiable," William said firmly. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911 himself, giving them the shelter's address and a brief description of Maggie's symptoms. The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they loaded Maggie onto a stretcher, Emma stood frozen, her small face a mask of controlled fear. William placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll take you to the hospital," he said. "We'll follow the ambulance." In the emergency room, William used every ounce of his influence to ensure Maggie received immediate attention. He identified himself as a family friend who would be covering all medical expenses, eliminating the usual insurance complications. Emma sat beside him in the waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't cried, but her knuckles were white with tension. "She'll be okay," William said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Emma nodded once, then asked in a small voice, "Can you call Miss Chen? She volunteers at the shelter on Thursdays. She should know where Grandma and I keep our important papers." William had learned over the past weeks that Emma was remarkably practical, even in crisis. He made the call, then sat back down beside her. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I could get you something from the cafeteria." Emma shook her head. "I need to be here when the doctor comes out." They waited in silence for nearly 2 hours. William made several more calls to Dennis, instructing him to remain available regardless of the hour. To his assistant, cancelling his meetings for the next day. To his personal physician, asking him to consult on Maggie's case. Finally, a doctor emerged and approached them. "Are you here for Margaret Thompson?" "Yes," William and Emma answered simultaneously, rising to their feet. The doctor looked questioningly at William, then at Emma. "Are you family?" "I'm her granddaughter," Emma said. "He's with me." The doctor nodded. "Your grandmother is stable now. We've done some tests and it appears she's suffering from severe kidney failure. Her creatinine levels are dangerously high, which indicates her kidneys aren't filtering waste properly from her blood." Emma's face remained composed, but William saw her small shoulders tense. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means she'll need dialysis right away," the doctor explained gently. "And eventually she'll likely need a kidney transplant." "Can I see her?" Emma asked. "Yes, but just for a few minutes. She's very tired, and we're preparing to transfer her to nephrology." As Emma followed a nurse to Maggie's room, William approached the doctor. "I'd like a complete explanation of her condition and all treatment options," he said. "Cost is not a factor. I'll be covering all expenses." The doctor gave him an appraising look. "Are you a relative?" "A friend," William replied. "A friend who owes them both more than I can ever repay." Later that evening, after Emma had been settled in a comfortable room, William arranged adjacent to the hospital. He sat alone in his penthouse, contemplating what he'd learned. Maggie's condition was serious, end-stage renal disease. Without a transplant, she would be dependent on dialysis for the remainder of her life, and even with dialysis, her prognosis was uncertain. William opened his laptop and began researching kidney transplants. He learned about living donors, compatibility requirements, recovery times. The more he read, the more a single thought crystallized in his mind. The next morning, he returned to the hospital early. Emma was already in Maggie's room, sitting beside the bed with a book open on her lap, though William suspected she wasn't actually reading it. Maggie looked alarmingly frail against the white hospital sheets, but she managed a weak smile when she saw William. "You don't need to keep checking on us," she said. "We'll be fine." "You won't be fine without proper treatment," William said, pulling up a chair. "I've been speaking with the doctors. They explained the situation to me." "Did they also explain what dialysis costs?" Maggie asked. "Even with Medicare, the out-of-pocket expenses." She trailed off, glancing at Emma, clearly not wanting to worry her granddaughter. "I told you before, I'm covering all costs," William said firmly, "but dialysis is only a temporary solution. You need a transplant." Maggie closed her eyes briefly. "Finding a donor could take years. The waiting list—" "You don't need to wait," William interrupted. "I want to be tested as a potential donor." The room fell silent. Emma's book slipped from her lap to the floor, but she didn't move to retrieve it. "You can't be serious," Maggie finally said. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," William replied. "I've already spoken to the transplant coordinator. They can run the initial compatibility tests today." "Why would you do this?" Maggie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You barely know us." William looked at Emma, who was watching him with those unnervingly perceptive eyes, then back to Maggie. "Because for the first time in my life I can do something that actually matters." The next few days passed in a blur of medical tests. To everyone's surprise, William proved to be a suitable match for Maggie. As the transplant team explained, Such compatibility between unrelated individuals wasn't common, but it wasn't unheard of either. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Dr. Lawrence, the transplant surgeon, asked William during their final consultation. "Kidney donation is major surgery. The recovery will be painful. And while most donors lead normal lives with one kidney, there are always risks." William thought about the risks. At 58, he wasn't young. His health had improved dramatically since his mysterious recovery began, but he was still not in peak condition. Yet every time doubt crept in, he remembered Emma's words. "You need to see what you caused." "I'm certain," he told Dr. Lawrence. "Schedule the surgery as soon as possible." The night before the operation, William visited Maggie in her hospital room. Emma had gone to the cafeteria with a volunteer from the shelter, giving them a rare moment alone. "I still don't understand why you're doing this," Maggie said, studying his face. William sat in the chair beside her bed. "I've been thinking about that myself. I could tell you it's because I feel guilty about my company's role in your situation, or because Emma somehow gave me back my ability to walk. Both would be true, but incomplete." He paused, organizing thoughts he'd never articulated before. "All my life I've taken, I've acquired, I've accumulated. I built a fortune by seeing opportunities and exploiting them without much concern for the consequences. Even my charitable giving was strategic: tax benefits, good publicity, networking opportunities." William gestured to his legs. "Then the stroke happened, and suddenly, all that accumulation meant nothing. I couldn't walk, I couldn't enjoy the empire I'd built. I became bitter, angry at the world." He looked directly at Maggie. "And then your granddaughter touched my hand and whispered words I couldn't understand, and everything changed. Not just my physical condition, but something deeper. For the first time, I'm giving without calculating what I'll get in return. And it feels right," Maggie finished for him. "It feels right." William nodded, surprised at the emotion tightening his throat. "Yes, it feels right." The next morning, William was prepped for surgery. As the anesthesiologist administered the medication that would put him under, his last conscious thought was of Emma's serious eyes and the inexplicable warmth of her small hand on his. He awoke hours later in the recovery room, groggy and in pain. A nurse noticed he was conscious and approached his bed. "How did it go?" William asked, his voice rough from the breathing tube that had been removed while he was still unconscious. "Very well," the nurse assured him. "Dr. Lawrence said everything went textbook perfect." "And Mrs. Thompson?" "She's doing well too, already showing good kidney function." The nurse checked his vital signs. "You have a visitor waiting, a little girl. She's been here for hours, very patient. Do you feel up to seeing her?" William nodded, wincing at the pain the movement caused. Moments later, Emma slipped into the room. She approached his bed cautiously, her expression solemn. "You saved my grandmother," she said simply. William tried to smile through the pain. "She's going to be okay." Emma nodded. "The doctors say the kidney is working really well. They said you gave her a very good one." "I'm glad," William whispered, fighting to stay awake despite the pull of the pain medication. Emma reached out and touched his hand, just as she had that day in the park. "Thank you," she said, and for the first time since he'd met her, William saw tears in her serious eyes. As he drifted back to sleep, William felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: peace. Recovery from the transplant surgery was slower than William had anticipated. For someone who had recently regained the ability to walk after years in a wheelchair, being confined to a hospital bed again was particularly frustrating. Yet he endured the discomfort with a patience that surprised his medical team. "You're a model patient, Mr. Morgan," his nurse commented one afternoon as she helped him take his first post-surgery walk down the hospital corridor. "The transplant coordinator says she wishes all her donors were this cooperative." William managed a small smile. "I've learned that fighting against necessary pain just creates more suffering." 2 weeks after the surgery, William was discharged. Maggie had been released a few days earlier, her new kidney functioning well. William had arranged for a private nurse to assist her at Riverside Haven, transforming their small living space with a proper hospital bed and medical equipment. On his first day home, William was surprised to receive a visitor. Mrs. Chen announced that Ms. Thompson had arrived, and William assumed it was Maggie coming to check on him. Instead, Emma walked into his living room, carrying a small potted plant. "Hello, Mr. Morgan," she said formally. Grandma wanted to come too, but the doctor said she should rest today. She sent this. Emma placed the plant on his coffee table. It's an aloe. She says they're hard to kill and good for healing. William smiled. Please thank her for me. How is she feeling? Better every day, Emma replied, perching on the edge of a chair without being invited. The medicine makes her tired sometimes, but the doctors say that's normal. And how are you? William asked, noticing the shadows under Emma's eyes. The past month had been difficult for her as well. Emma shrugged. I'm okay. Miss Chen has been staying with me at night when Grandma was in the hospital. William made a mental note to give Mrs. Chen a substantial bonus. That was kind of her. A comfortable silence fell between them. Emma looked around the penthouse with frank curiosity, her eyes lingering on the panoramic view of Central Park. You can see the whole park from here, she observed. Even the spot where we met. William hadn't thought of that before. He slowly rose from his recliner and joined Emma at the window. You're right, it's right there. He pointed to a playground in the distance. Emma pressed her hand against the glass. You were so angry that day. I was, William admitted. I'd been angry for a long time. Are you still angry? William considered the question carefully. No, he said finally. Not anymore. Emma nodded, as if his answer confirmed something she already knew. She turned from the window and fixed him with her serious gaze. There's something I need to tell you, Mr. Morgan. Something important. William returned to his chair, gesturing for Emma to sit as well. What is it? Emma took a deep breath. When I was helping Grandma organize her things yesterday, I found something. An old yearbook. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. Look. William unfolded the paper, a photocopy of a yearbook page. It showed a classroom of children, approximately 6 or 7 years old, with a young teacher standing beside them. The caption read, Mrs. Thompson's first grade class, Oakwood Elementary, 1972. I don't understand, William said, looking at the grainy image. Emma pointed to a small boy in the back row, partially hidden behind another child. That's you! William stared at the photo in disbelief, then at the teacher. Though much younger, the face was unmistakably Maggie's. He searched his memory, trying to recall a Mrs. Thompson from his childhood. Grandma says you were very quiet, Emma continued. She remembers you never looked anyone in the eyes. She said the other kids sometimes made fun of you because your clothes were always too big. Fragments of memory began to surface. A gentle voice, a classroom with colorful alphabet letters on the wall, the smell of chalk. I remember Oakwood Elementary, William said slowly. My father lost his job that year. My mother had to work 2 shifts at the diner. He trailed off, the memories becoming more distinct. Mrs. Thompson gave me a jacket once. Said someone had left it behind, but it was new, it fit perfectly. That was Grandma, Emma said simply. William stared at the photo again, a wave of emotion rising in his throat. I had no idea. There's more, Emma said, her voice quieter now. Grandma was let go from her last teaching job because of budget cuts. The school district was reducing staff after losing funding from a corporate partnership that ended. The corporation was Morgan Enterprises. The revelation hit William like a physical blow. When did this happen? 3 years ago, right after my mom got sick. Emma's voice remained steady, but William could see the pain in her eyes. That's when everything started going wrong for us. Grandma couldn't find another full-time teaching position at her age. She took substitute jobs, but it wasn't enough. William closed his eyes, the full weight of the connection settling on him. His company's decisions had directly contributed to Maggie and Emma's circumstances, not just the real estate development that claimed their housing, but the terminated educational partnership that cost Maggie her livelihood. I'm so sorry, Emma, he said, opening his eyes to face her. I truly didn't know. Grandma said you wouldn't have, Emma replied. She said big companies make decisions about money, not people. The assessment was accurate and damning in its simplicity. For decades, William had run Morgan Enterprises with a singular focus on profit and growth. People affected by his decisions were abstract concepts, not individuals with stories and struggles. She's right, William acknowledged. That's how I operated. But it's not how I want to be anymore. Emma studied him intently, as if measuring the truth of his words. Grandma also said people can change if they want to badly enough. I hope she's right about that too, William said. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of William's physical therapist. Emma rose to leave but paused at the door. Mr. Morgan, there's a man who comes to the shelter sometimes. His name is David. He says he used to work for you. William frowned, trying to place the name. There have been thousands of employees at Morgan Enterprises over the years. What does he look like? Tall, grey hair that's kind of messy. He has a scar above his right eye. Emma traced a line on her own forehead. He said he was in security. A memory clicked into place. David Mercer, former head of security for several Morgan properties. William vaguely recalled that he'd been let go during a cost-cutting phase about 4 years ago. Why does he come to the shelter? William asked. Emma's expression darkened. He lives there now in the single men's section. He lost his apartment after he got fired. He couldn't find another good job because he didn't have references. She delivered this information matter-of-factly, without accusation, which somehow made it worse. After Emma left, William sat for a long time, staring at the yearbook photo. The small boy in the back row, himself at 6 years old, looked sad and withdrawn. William tried to remember what his childhood had been like before his father's drinking had destroyed their family, before money became the measure of everything. The next day, against his doctor's advice, William asked Dennis to drive him to Riverside Haven. He found Maggie in the community room, leading a small group of children in a reading lesson despite her own recovery status. She looked up when he entered, surprise evident on her face. "William? Should you be out of bed?" "Probably not," he admitted. "But we need to talk." Maggie excused herself from the children and led William to a quiet corner. "If this is about what Emma told you, there's no need. The past is the past, is it?" William asked. "Or does it shape everything that comes after?" He took a deep breath. "Maggie, I owe you so much more than a kidney. You were kind to me when I was a child with nothing. You lost your job because of my company's decisions. You lost your home because of a development project I approved. And now you're living in a shelter that exists only because I had a stroke and wasn't able to complete the demolition." Maggie's expression softened. "William, I don't blame you for the circumstances that brought us here. Life is complicated. We all make decisions based on what we know and value at the time." "That's just it," William insisted. "What I valued was wrong. I've spent my entire adult life chasing wealth and power, believing they would bring me happiness or at least satisfaction. Then I lost my ability to walk, and none of it mattered anymore. I became bitter, angry at the world." He met her eyes directly. "Until Emma." Maggie smiled slightly. "She has that effect on people." "I want to make things right," William said. "Not just for you and Emma, but for everyone here. For David Mercer and all the others who've been hurt by my choices." "What are you planning to do?" Maggie asked, a note of caution in her voice. "I don't know yet," William admitted, "but I'm going to figure it out." He spent the rest of the day at Riverside Haven listening to residents' stories. Some, like David Mercer, had direct connections to Morgan Enterprises. A maintenance worker laid off when a building was sold. A receptionist whose entire department was outsourced. Others had been displaced by development projects throughout the city, many bearing the Morgan name. David Mercer was initially suspicious of William's presence. "Come to see how the other half lives, Mr. Morgan?" he asked, his voice edged with bitterness. "I came to listen," William replied simply, "and to apologize." David's laugh was harsh. "An apology won't pay my rent or fix my credit score." "No," William agreed, "but it's a start." By the time William left Riverside Haven that evening, he had a notebook filled with stories, needs, and ideas. His mind was racing with possibilities, but he knew he needed to be strategic. Morgan Enterprises was no longer his to command. The board had effectively sidelined him after his stroke, but he still held significant shares and influence. As Dennis drove him home, William made a call to his longtime attorney. "James, it's William Morgan. I need you to set up a meeting with the board as soon as possible. And I want a complete audit of all Morgan properties and development projects for the past 10 years, with particular attention to any that resulted in residential displacements or job losses." "That's a tall order, Will," James replied. "May I ask why?" William watched the city lights blur past the car window. "Because I've been looking at the balance sheet wrong all these years. I've been counting profits and losses in dollars, not in human lives." Later that night, unable to sleep despite his physical exhaustion, William sat at his desk reviewing documents his attorney had sent over. The scale of Morgan Enterprises' impact on New York's housing landscape was even more extensive than he'd realized. Thousands of affordable units had been converted to luxury housing or commercial space under his direction. His phone rang, an unusual occurrence at midnight. The caller ID showed Riverside Haven. "Hello?" William answered, immediately concerned. "Mr. Morgan, it's Emma." Her voice was tight with anxiety. "Grandma's not feeling well. The nurse says her temperature is high and we should go to the hospital, but the shelter van isn't available tonight. Could you help us?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes, William said, already reaching for his coat. As he waited for Dennis to bring the car around, William reflected on how quickly his priorities had shifted. A month ago, his most pressing concern had been whether he would walk again. Now he was focused on a woman and child he barely knew, yet who had somehow become central to his life. On the drive to Riverside Haven, William realized with sudden clarity what he needed to do. It wasn't enough to feel guilty or make isolated charitable gestures. Real change required a complete realignment of his resources and influence. By the time they reached the hospital with Maggie, whose fever turned out to be a minor infection, quickly treatable with antibiotics, William had formulated a plan that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone at Riverside Haven. What he didn't know was that his former partner and current CEO of Morgan Enterprises, Frederick Westbrook, had been watching his activities with growing concern, and Frederick had no intention of letting William Morgan dismantle the empire they had built together. Frederick Westbrook stood at the window of his corner office on the 50th floor of Morgan Tower, watching a winter storm roll in over Manhattan. At 55, Frederick's once dark hair had turned an elegant silver, contrasting sharply with his tailored black suit. His lean face, with its perpetually calculating expression, had been featured in countless business magazines as the embodiment of corporate ambition. "He's done what?" Frederick asked, his voice deceptively calm as he continued to gaze out the window. Lawrence Chen, Morgan Enterprises' head of legal affairs, cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Morgan has requested a special meeting of the board. He's proposing a significant restructuring of the company's real estate holdings and community engagement policies." Frederick turned slowly, fixing Chen with a glacial stare. "And what exactly does this restructuring entail?" "From what we've gathered, he wants to convert several of our pending luxury developments into mixed-income housing. He's also proposing the creation of a substantial community fund to provide resources for people displaced by past Morgan projects." Chen shuffled his papers uncomfortably. "Additionally, he's requesting the reinstatement of several educational initiatives that were terminated during our last round of corporate streamlining." "I see." Frederick returned to the window, his reflection a study in controlled fury. "And the board's response?" "Mixed. Some members are intrigued by the potential tax benefits and positive publicity. Others are concerned about shareholder value." Chen hesitated. "There's also considerable curiosity about Mr. Morgan's recovery. The news that he's walking again, combined with this apparent philosophical transformation, has created a certain mystique." Frederick's jaw tightened. He and William had built Morgan Enterprises from the ground up, starting with a single rundown apartment building 30 years ago. While William had been the face of the company, the charismatic visionary, Frederick had always been the strategic mind, the one who made the difficult decisions that ensured their success. When William had suffered his stroke 5 years earlier, Frederick had skillfully managed the transition of power, positioning himself as the logical successor while maintaining the appearance of loyal friendship. He had visited William regularly for the first year, but as it became clear that William would never return to his former capabilities, the visits had dwindled. Frederick had more important things to do than watch his once dynamic partner wither away in bitterness. Now, it seemed, William had not only regained his physical abilities, but was threatening to undo years of Frederick's careful work. "This is absurd," Frederick said finally. "William's recent health issues have clearly affected his judgment. As CEO and as his friend, I have a responsibility to protect both him and the company from impulsive decisions." "What would you like us to do, sir?" Chen asked. Frederick smiled thinly. "First, delay the board meeting. Cite regulatory concerns, procedural issues, whatever you need to. Second, I want a complete psychological evaluation of William's capacity to make major business decisions. Emphasize his recent medical trauma and apparent personality changes. Third, prepare a detailed financial analysis showing the catastrophic impact his proposals would have on our bottom line. Chen nodded, making notes. And what about the Lincoln Academy property, the one where that shelter is located? Frederick's eyes narrowed. Ah yes, Riverside Haven, the root of this sudden transformation, I understand. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the windowsill. Accelerate the luxury retail development plans for that site. I want construction to begin immediately. But sir, the non-profit has a lease with numerous contingency clauses, Frederick interrupted. Find one we can trigger. Health code violations, structural issues, whatever it takes. I want those people out of there within 30 days. As Chen left to implement his instructions, Frederick remained at the window, watching the storm clouds darken the city. William's unexpected recovery and subsequent crusade were more than an inconvenience. They were a threat to everything Frederick had worked for. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. Diane? Frederick Westbrook. I need information on a situation at Riverside Haven Shelter. Specifically, I need to know everything about a woman named Margaret Thompson and her granddaughter Emma, and I need it by the end of the day. Across town, unaware of the storm brewing at Morgan Tower, William was meeting with James Patterson, his attorney of 20 years, in his penthouse. The board is stalling, James reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Chen. Frederick has raised concerns about your mental competency to propose such significant changes. William smiled grimly. Of course he has. Frederick never could tolerate anything that might affect the bottom line. This goes beyond profit concerns, Will. He's making a play for permanent control. He's suggesting that your stroke, followed by this unexplained recovery and sudden change in priorities, indicates psychological instability. William set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. What's his next move likely to be? James sighed. Based on what my sources tell me, he's already accelerating the development plans for the Lincoln Academy property. He's looking for ways to terminate the shelter's lease early. William felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He's going after Riverside Haven directly, going after Emma and Maggie. It appears so, James agreed, and he's gathering information on them as we speak. How soon could he move on the property? With the right pretext, 30 days, maybe less. William stood and walked to the window, his gait still slightly uneven, but growing stronger each day. From his penthouse, he could see the edge of Harlem where Riverside Haven stood. Then we need to move faster, he said, turning back to James. I want to create a new foundation immediately. Transfer 30% of my personal Morgan Enterprises shares to it, along with my other investments. The foundation's primary mission will be affordable housing and community support services, with an initial focus on the residents of Riverside Haven. James looked startled. Will, that's over $2 billion. I'm aware of the value, William replied calmly. I also want to purchase the Lincoln Academy property from Morgan Enterprises directly. Offer 20% above market value. Frederick won't be able to refuse without raising shareholder concerns. He'll fight this, James warned. He'll claim you're not mentally competent to make these decisions. Let him try, William said. I've had complete neurological and psychological evaluations as part of my post-transplant care. I'm more sound of mind now than I've been in years. As James left to begin implementing William's instructions, the phone rang. It was Maggie. William, I'm sorry to bother you, but something strange is happening at the shelter, she said, her voice tense. There are people here taking photographs, examining the building. They say they're from the city health department, but they're asking a lot of questions about you. Don't engage with them, William instructed. I'm sending Dennis to pick you and Emma up. Pack whatever you need for a few days. You're staying with me until we sort this out. Within hours, Maggie and Emma were settled in William's guest rooms. Emma explored the penthouse with contained excitement, while Maggie sat with William in his study, concern etched on her face. What's going on, William? She asked. Why are these people suddenly interested in the shelter? William explained the situation with Frederick and the board, watching Maggie's expression grow increasingly troubled. So, we might lose the shelter because your former partner is trying to stop you from helping us? She asked when he finished. That's part of it, William acknowledged, but it's more complex than that. Frederick has been moving the company in a direction I no longer support, even before my stroke. Our values diverged years ago, but I was too focused on growth to notice or care. Maggie studied him thoughtfully. "And now? Now I see clearly for the first time in decades," William said. "I see what I've built and what I've destroyed in the process. I want to use whatever time I have left to rebuild rather than demolish." Their conversation was interrupted by Emma, who appeared in the doorway with a notebook in hand. "Mr. Morgan, can I show you something?" she asked. William nodded, and Emma approached, opening the notebook to a page filled with childish handwriting. It was a list of names, each followed by a brief note. "What is this?" William asked, scanning the entries. "People who need help," Emma explained. "I keep track of everyone at the shelter and what they need, like Mr. David needs new work boots for his construction job interview, and Ms. Ramirez needs asthma medicine for her son. I try to help when I can, but some things are too big." William flipped through the pages, recognizing many names from his visits to Riverside Haven. Each entry represented a specific need, dream, or aspiration, not grand wishes, but basic necessities and modest hopes. "Is this what you were doing in the park that day?" he asked. "Playing doctor, helping people?" Emma nodded. "I can't fix everything, but I try." William felt something shift inside him, a crystallization of purpose. "Emma, would you be willing to help me with something important? I need someone who really knows what the people at Riverside Haven need." The next morning, Frederick Westbrook was reviewing the preliminary report on Margaret and Emma Thompson when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. William Morgan was holding a press conference at Riverside Haven. Frederick switched on the television in his office just in time to see William, standing with the assistance of a cane, addressing a crowd of reporters outside the former school building. Beside him stood an elderly woman and a small, serious-eyed girl. "Today, I'm announcing the creation of the New Foundations Initiative," William was saying, his voice strong and clear. "This independently funded organization will focus on creating sustainable, affordable housing communities throughout New York City, beginning with the full renovation and expansion of Riverside Haven." Frederick's face darkened as William continued, outlining a comprehensive plan that would not only secure the shelter's future, but transform it into a model community with educational facilities, job training programs, and health services. "As my first act as New Foundations chairman," William said, "I'm pleased to announce that we have purchased the Lincoln Academy property from Morgan Enterprises, ensuring that the families currently residing here will never again face the threat of displacement." The reporters erupted with questions, many directed at Frederick's role in the previous plans to develop the property. William handled them diplomatically, never directly criticizing his former partner, but making it clear that Morgan Enterprises' priorities were changing. Frederick stabbed the remote control, silencing the television. "Get Chen in here now," he barked at his assistant. Within minutes, the legal counsel arrived, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Sir, I've just received notification that Mr. Morgan has purchased the Lincoln Academy property using personal funds. The offer was substantially above market value, and the board approved it unanimously this morning." "Impossible," Frederick snapped. "I would have been notified of any board meeting." "It was an emergency session, sir. Given your expressed interest in the property, you were recused from the vote to avoid conflict of interest." Frederick's carefully maintained composure cracked. "This is a coup. He's undermining everything we've built." "There's more," Chen continued reluctantly. "Mr. Morgan has transferred a significant portion of his shares to a new charitable foundation. While he remains a major shareholder, his voting bloc, combined with those sympathetic to his new direction, now constitutes a majority." As the implications sank in, Frederick's fury crystallized into cold determination. William might have won this round, but the battle was far from over. He still had one card to play: the mysterious circumstances of William's recovery and his strange connection to the Thompson girl. "Get me everything you can on Emma Thompson," he instructed Chen. "Medical records, school reports, family history. There's something not right about this whole situation, and I intend to expose it." That evening, as the first snowfall of December began to dust Manhattan, William sat with Maggie and Emma in his penthouse, watching news coverage of the day's announcement. "They're calling it the Morgan Miracle," Maggie remarked, gesturing to the television where reporters were discussing William's transformation from ruthless developer to housing advocate. William shook his head. "The real miracle is sitting right here," he said, glancing at Emma, who was sketching floor plans for the renovated shelter in her notebook. Emma looked up. It wasn't a miracle, Mr. Morgan. I just helped you remember something you already knew. And what was that? William asked gently. That you were someone before you were rich, she replied simply. Someone who needed help once too. William felt the truth of her words resonate deeply. For decades he had defined himself by his wealth and achievements, forgetting the scared little boy in Mrs. Thompson's classroom who had once received kindness he couldn't repay. His reflection was interrupted by James Patterson calling with urgent news. Frederick is digging into Emma's background, the attorney reported. He's requesting her medical records, school files, everything he can get his hands on. I think he's trying to build some kind of case around her role in your recovery. William thanked him for the warning and hung up, turning to Maggie with concern. Frederick is investigating Emma. He's trying to find an angle to discredit what we're doing. Maggie's face hardened. What does he think he'll find? That she's some kind of child miracle worker? That she has magical powers? She shook her head in disgust. Emma is just a child who cares deeply about people. That's her only magic. I know that, William assured her, but Frederick will twist anything he can find to serve his purposes. Emma, who had been listening quietly, closed her notebook. I'm not scared of him, she said with characteristic directness. He's just angry because you're doing the right thing now. William smiled at her confidence, but inside he felt a growing unease. Frederick Westbrook was a dangerous enemy, and he wouldn't stop until he had found a way to regain control of Morgan Enterprises, of the narrative surrounding William's recovery, and of the future of Riverside Haven. What none of them realized was that Frederick had already found something he believed he could use. A connection between Emma Thompson and several other cases of unexplained recoveries at hospitals where her mother had worked before her illness. It wasn't much, but for a man desperate to discredit a child, it might be enough to start a very damaging rumor. The snowfall that began the night of William's press conference developed into the worst winter storm to hit New York in decades. For 3 days, the city was blanketed in white. Traffic slowed to a crawl, and the usual frenetic pace of Manhattan yielded to the quiet insistence of nature. In William's penthouse, the storm created an unexpected pause, a space for reflection and planning. Emma spent hours at the window, watching the snow transform the city, while Maggie recovered her strength in the comfort of the guest room. William used the time to work with James Patterson on the legal structure of new foundations, occasionally joining Emma at the window to share her wonder at the transformed landscape. It looks so different, Emma observed on the second day of the storm. Like all the broken parts are covered up, but still there underneath, William replied. The snow just gives us a chance to imagine what could be instead of what is. Emma considered this. That's what you're doing with new foundations, isn't it? Imagining what could be. William smiled at her perceptiveness. Yes, but imagination isn't enough. We have to actually build it. As the storm began to clear on the 4th day, Frederick Westbrook made his move. William was in his study reviewing architectural proposals for the Riverside Haven renovation when Mrs. Chen appeared at the door, her expression troubled. Mr. Morgan, there's a news story you should see. William followed her to the living room, where Maggie sat frozen before the television. On screen, Frederick stood at a podium in the Morgan Enterprises press room, his expression one of grave concern. While I applaud William's apparent recovery and newfound philanthropic interests, Frederick was saying, I feel compelled, as both his business partner and friend, to express serious concerns about the circumstances surrounding these events. Frederick gestured to a display board showing photographs of Emma, interspersed with medical charts and what appeared to be case files. Over the past month, I've been troubled by William's sudden fixation on a child, Emma Thompson, whom he claims somehow cured his paralysis. My concern led me to investigate, and what I've discovered is deeply disturbing. Frederick turned to the display. Emma Thompson has been present at no fewer than 6 cases of unexplained medical recoveries in the past 3 years. In each instance, critically ill patients suddenly improved after encounters with this child. While some might call these miracles, I believe something far more troubling is at work. The camera cut to a reporter asking, Are you suggesting some kind of medical fraud, Mr. Westbrook? Frederick's expression was carefully composed. I am suggesting that a vulnerable man, still recovering from a devastating stroke and subsequent kidney donation, has been manipulated by individuals using this child as an instrument of what I can only describe as a form of faith healing or medical charlatanism. William felt a cold fury building inside him. "Turn it off," he said quietly. Maggie's hands were shaking. "How dare he? Emma is just a child." "Where is Emma now?" William asked, suddenly concerned. "In her room, drawing," Maggie replied. "She doesn't need to see this garbage." William's phone began ringing incessantly. Reporters, board members, friends, all wanting his response to Frederick's accusations. He ignored them, focusing instead on the immediate threat to Emma. "James is on his way over," he told Maggie. "We need to address this quickly before it escalates further." "Address what?" Emma's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, notebook in hand, her expression unnervingly calm for a child who had just been labeled a charlatan on national television. "Emma, honey," Maggie began, "there's a man saying some untrue things about you on TV." "I know," Emma said simply. "I heard." William approached her, kneeling despite the protest from his still healing incision. "Emma, I'm so sorry about this. Frederick is trying to hurt me by hurting you. We're going to fix it." Emma studied his face. "He's afraid," she said with startling insight. "He's afraid of what you're doing because he can't understand it. He only understands taking, not giving." Before William could respond, James Patterson arrived, bringing with him a team of legal and public relations experts. The penthouse quickly transformed into a crisis management center, with strategies being developed to counter Frederick's accusations. "We need to get ahead of this narrative," advised Paula Martinez, the PR specialist. "Issue a strong statement condemning these attacks on a minor. Emphasize William's medical documentation. Frame this as a desperate attempt by Frederick to maintain control of Morgan Enterprises." William listened to their recommendations, but his attention was repeatedly drawn to Emma, who sat quietly in a corner, continuing to draw in her notebook as if the chaos around her was happening in another world. "What are you working on?" he asked her during a break in the strategy session. Emma showed him her drawing, a detailed floor plan for what appeared to be a medical clinic. "For Riverside Haven," she explained. "People need doctors they can trust, who won't charge too much." William studied the careful lines, the thoughtful layout that somehow accounted for both efficiency and comfort. "This is very good, Emma. Have you always been interested in medicine?" She nodded. "Since my mom got sick. The doctors tried to help her, but they couldn't. I thought maybe I could learn how to help people better than they did." The simplicity of her ambition struck William deeply. While the adults around them scrambled to manage a public relations crisis, Emma remained focused on creating something that would genuinely help others. "May I show them your drawing?" William asked suddenly. Emma looked surprised but nodded. William stood and called for everyone's attention. "We're approaching this all wrong," he announced, holding up Emma's notebook. "We're playing Frederick's game, responding to his accusations, staying on the defensive. Instead, we need to show people what this is really about." He laid the drawing on the coffee table, where everyone could see it. "This is Emma's vision for a community health clinic at Riverside Haven. Not a miracle cure or faith healing, but practical, accessible medical care for people who need it." William turned to Paula. "Instead of a statement denying Frederick's accusations, I want to hold a press conference at Riverside Haven tomorrow. I want to show people the reality of what we're trying to build, not just housing, but a complete community with healthcare, education, job training." James looked skeptical. "Will, Frederick's allegations are serious. We need to address them directly." "And we will," William assured him. "But on our terms, not his. We'll have my medical team present to explain my recovery. We'll be transparent about Emma's role, a child whose compassion reminded me of what truly matters. But most importantly, we'll shift the focus to the future we're trying to build, not the controversy Frederick is trying to create." The next morning, as reporters gathered outside Riverside Haven, a surprise announcement came from Morgan Enterprises. 3 board members had resigned, citing irreconcilable differences with current leadership. Frederick Westbrook was notably absent from the company's statement on the matter. William stood at the makeshift podium in front of the former school building, Maggie and Emma beside him, and residents of the shelter arranged behind them in a show of solidarity. Camera crews jostled for position as William prepared to speak. "Yesterday, allegations were made about my recovery and about this remarkable young woman," William began, gesturing to Emma. "I could spend this time defending us against those allegations, but instead, I want to show you something more important." He unfolded a large architectural rendering of the reimagined Riverside Haven, a comprehensive community center with affordable housing units, healthcare facilities, educational spaces, and job training centers. This is not about miracles or mysterious cures, William continued. This is about recognizing our shared humanity and our responsibility to each other. 5 years ago, I suffered a stroke that left me unable to walk. It also left me bitter and isolated, focused only on what I had lost. William glanced at Emma. When I met Emma Thompson in Central Park, she didn't perform a miracle. She simply reminded me that I was more than my limitations. Her compassion, her belief that things could be better, sparked something in me that medical science can't fully explain. Call it hope, call it purpose, call it the power of human connection. Whatever it was, it changed me. He gestured to the residents behind him. Every person here has a story of loss, struggle, and resilience. Many of them lost their homes or livelihoods because of decisions made by companies like mine. New Foundations isn't about charity or guilt. It's about creating a different model for community development, one that puts people first. As William continued outlining the practical details of the Riverside Haven renovation, a commotion at the back of the crowd drew attention. Frederick Westbrook pushed his way forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is a publicity stunt," he called out. "William Morgan is using this child and these people to reinvent himself after decades of ruthless business practices." Security moved toward Frederick, but William waved them off. "Let him speak," he said calmly. Frederick approached the podium, his composure cracking. "You're destroying everything we built, Will. Everything we worked for." "No, Frederick," William replied evenly. "I'm trying to build something better, something that lasts, not because it generates wealth for the few, but because it creates value for the many. These people," Frederick gestured dismissively at the shelter residents, "they're not your responsibility. They're not anyone's responsibility but their own." A murmur of anger ran through the crowd, but William raised his hand for quiet. "That's where you're wrong, Fred. We're all responsible for each other. That's what I've learned." Before Frederick could respond, David Mercer stepped forward from among the residents. "Mr. Westbrook, I worked security for Morgan Enterprises for 15 years. When the company decided to cut costs, I was let go without warning or adequate compensation. I lost my apartment, then my car, then nearly everything else. Do you remember me?" Frederick's expression flickered with momentary recognition before hardening again. "Individual employment decisions are made based on company needs. It's just business." "Just business," David repeated. "That's what you said when you signed the termination papers. No severance, no references, just, it's business, nothing personal." Well, it felt pretty personal when I was sleeping in a subway station. One by one, other residents stepped forward with similar stories. Lives upended by just business decisions, families displaced by development projects, communities fractured by corporate calculations that never accounted for human cost. As the testimonies continued, Emma approached Frederick. The crowd fell silent as the small girl looked up at the powerful executive. "You're angry because you're scared," she said, her voice clear in the hush. "You think if you help people, you'll have less. But Mr. Morgan is showing that when you help others, you get something better than money." Frederick stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then he turned to the assembled reporters. "Are you all buying this sentimental nonsense? This choreographed performance?" A journalist from the New York Times stepped forward. "Mr. Westbrook, we've received documentation of your attempts to bribe shelter residents for negative information about Mr. Morgan and the Thompson family. Would you care to comment on that?" The color drained from Frederick's face. Another reporter called out, "Is it true that you ordered an illegal investigation into Emma Thompson's medical history?" As Frederick struggled to respond, a shelter resident held up a phone. "I recorded him offering me money to lie about Mr. Morgan," the man announced. "Said he'd get me an apartment if I told reporters that Morgan was using us for publicity." The press conference quickly shifted focus, with reporters firing questions at an increasingly flustered Frederick. William watched with a mixture of sadness and relief as his former partner's machinations unraveled in real time. "That's enough," he said finally, stepping between Frederick and the cameras. "This isn't what today is about." He turned to Frederick. "Fred, we've known each other for 30 years. We built something significant together. I'm sorry it's ending this way." Frederick's expression wavered between rage and resignation. Without another word, he turned and pushed his way back through the crowd, leaving a wake of whispers and camera flashes. William returned to the podium. Now, as I was saying before we were interrupted, the first phase of the Riverside Haven renovation will begin next month. 6 months later, on a warm spring day, William stood in what had once been the gymnasium of Lincoln Academy. The space had been transformed into a bright, modern community center, with natural light streaming through new skylights. Construction crews were still working on other parts of the building, but this section was complete and ready for its official opening. "It's even better than the drawings," Maggie said, joining him. Her health had stabilized in the months following the transplant, and she had taken on a leadership role in New Foundation's educational programs. William nodded. "The architects incorporated every one of Emma's suggestions, speaking of which, where is our resident design consultant?" "In the clinic, of course," Maggie replied with a smile. "Where else would she be?" They found Emma in what had once been the school's science wing, now converted into a community health center. She was helping a doctor arrange supplies in the pediatric examination room, her attention to detail evident in the child-friendly decorations and thoughtfully organized equipment. "Dr. Reynolds says I can volunteer here after school once it opens," Emma announced when she saw them. "Not with patients yet, but helping with paperwork and supplies." "An excellent first step toward medical school," William agreed, having become well-versed in Emma's career plans. The transformation of Riverside Haven had been matched by changes in William's own life. He had officially stepped down from his role at Morgan Enterprises following Frederick's resignation, focusing his energy entirely on New Foundations. The initiative had expanded beyond the initial project, with similar community-centered developments beginning in other parts of the city. Frederick had left New York, reportedly relocating to Miami, where he was attempting to rebuild his reputation with a new venture. The scandal surrounding his tactics against William and Emma had significantly damaged his standing in New York's business community, though William had declined to pursue legal action against his former partner. As they walked through the renovated building, residents greeted William not with the deference usually accorded to wealth, but with the warmth reserved for a neighbor and friend. He knew most by name now, was familiar with their stories, their struggles, their aspirations. "There's someone here to see you," Maggie said as they returned to the community center. "She's been waiting in your office." William entered what had once been the school principal's office to find a young woman in a white coat sitting patiently. She stood as he entered, extending her hand. "Mr. Morgan, I'm Dr. Sarah Martinez from Columbia University Medical Center. Thank you for meeting with me." "Of course," William replied, shaking her hand. "How can I help you?" Dr. Martinez sat down, her expression serious. "I've been following your case with great interest. The neurological recovery you experienced is extremely rare, especially given the duration of your paralysis before improvement began." William nodded. He had discussed his recovery with numerous medical professionals over the past months, always careful to present the facts without speculation. "With your permission," Dr. Martinez continued, "I'd like to include your case in a research study I'm conducting on spontaneous neurological recovery. It would involve some additional scans and tests, all non-invasive." "I'm happy to participate," William said. "If my experience can help advance medical understanding, I'm all for it." Dr. Martinez hesitated. "There's one more thing. I'd also like to interview Emma Thompson." William stiffened slightly. "Emma is a child, not a research subject. She's already been through enough publicity because of her connection to my recovery." "I understand your protectiveness," Dr. Martinez assured him, "but I'm not approaching this from a sensationalist angle. I've documented several cases of unexpected medical improvements that occurred after meaningful human connections, what some researchers are beginning to call the connection effect. Emma's interaction with you fits a pattern we're studying." "What kind of pattern?" William asked, his interest piqued despite his caution. "Evidence suggests that certain interpersonal connections can trigger neurochemical responses that promote healing. It's not miracle cures or faith healing. It's biology, psychology, and human connection intersecting in ways we're just beginning to understand scientifically." She leaned forward earnestly. "Your case could help advance this research significantly." William considered her request. "I'll discuss it with Maggie and Emma. If they're comfortable participating, then I have no objection. But their well-being comes first." Later that evening, as William, Maggie, and Emma shared dinner in what had become their regular routine, he mentioned Dr. Martinez's request. "A research study?" Emma asked, her eyes lighting up with interest. About how people get better. Yes, William confirmed. She wants to understand more about how human connections might influence healing. Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. I'll do it. Maybe it will help doctors understand better. Are you sure, honey? Maggie asked. But you don't have to. I want to, Emma insisted. If it helps people, I should do it. William smiled at her certainty. In the months since they'd met in Central Park, he had never ceased to be amazed by Emma's clarity of purpose. While most children her age were focused on games and friends, Emma remained steadfastly committed to her goal of helping others. The next day, as final preparations were made for the community center's grand opening, William found Emma in the clinic again, this time arranging a bulletin board with health information pamphlets. Emma, he said, I've been thinking about Dr. Martinez's research, about connections and healing. Emma looked up, waiting for him to continue. The day we met when you touched my hand and whispered something, what did you say? I could never make it out. Emma smiled slightly. I said, sometimes helping someone else is the best way to heal yourself. My mom used to tell me that when I was sad. William felt a wave of emotion. Such a simple truth, yet one he had forgotten during his decades of acquisition and competition. Your mother sounds like she was very wise. She was, Emma agreed. She always said that even when you can't fix the big problems, you can still help with the small ones. And sometimes the small ones are just as important. William thought about all the small problems his wealth and influence had created over the years. Families displaced, livelihoods disrupted, communities fractured, and now he was working to address those same problems, one person, one family, one community at a time. You know, he said, I never did write you that check for $1 million. Emma arranged the last pamphlet on the bulletin board. You did something better. You helped everyone. The grand opening ceremony for the Riverside Haven Community Center took place on a perfect June afternoon. Hundreds of people gathered in the renovated gymnasium, residents, local officials, media, and supporters of new foundations. William, walking without assistance now, took the podium after several speakers had shared their experiences with the project. A year ago, I was a bitter man in a wheelchair, convinced that nothing would ever change, he began. Today I stand before you not just physically transformed, but changed in ways far more profound. He gestured to the renovated space around them. This center represents more than just a building project. It represents a new understanding of what development truly means. Real development isn't about replacing people with profit. It's about creating spaces where people can develop themselves, their potential, their dreams, their connections to each other. William's gaze found Emma in the front row, sitting beside Maggie. I learned this lesson from an extraordinary girl who, at 10 years old, understood something I had forgotten in my 58 years. That true wealth comes from what we give, not what we take. As the ceremony concluded and people mingled in the new community space, William noticed Emma slipping away from the crowd. He followed her to a quiet corridor where she stood looking at a wall covered with photographs, images of the shelter residents, construction process, and community events leading up to the opening. Why aren't you at the party? He asked, joining her. You're the guest of honor, after all. Emma shook her head. I didn't do anything. Everyone did this together. William smiled at her characteristic modesty. What are you looking at? She pointed to a photo of residents working alongside construction crews, everyone smiling despite the visible exhaustion. They look happy, even though they're working really hard. That's because they're building something that matters, William explained, something that will last. Emma nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Morgan, can I ask you something important? Of course. When I grow up, I want to be a doctor, a real one, not just pretend, but medical school is really expensive. Do you think, could new foundations maybe help people like me go to college someday? William felt a surge of emotion. Even now, thinking about her future, Emma's focus was on creating a path for others as well. As a matter of fact, he said, the new foundation's educational trust is already being established. It will provide scholarships for residents and their children, all the way through graduate school if they wish. Emma's serious face broke into a rare, brilliant smile. Really? For anyone at Riverside Haven? For anyone who needs it, William confirmed. And I have no doubt that Dr. Emma Thompson will one day be treating patients with the same compassion she's shown from the beginning. As they returned to the celebration, William reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A chance encounter in a park? A cynical challenge? A child's unflinching belief in possibility? These small moments had created a ripple effect that continued to expand in ways he could never have imagined. The true miracle, he realized, wasn't that he could walk again. It was that he had learned to see, to truly see the impact of his actions on others, to recognize the value of connection over accumulation, to understand that real healing goes far beyond the physical. Emma tugged at his hand, pulling him toward a group of children playing in the new recreation area. "Come on, Mr. Morgan, they want you to see what they built." William allowed himself to be led, smiling at the irony. He had spent decades building an empire of steel and glass, yet nothing he had constructed had ever felt as solid, as meaningful, as the community taking shape around him now. And it had all begun with a simple challenge in a park, a child's touch, and words he couldn't understand until he was ready to hear them. Sometimes helping someone else is the best way to heal yourself.